How's it going, everybody? Anthony back with the continuance of when I got home after rehab. So, as I left off in my last video, little really quick recap. I had got the shower chair, I had got the Hoyer lift, I had got the hospital bed, to be able to live like if I was in the hospital. But I'm at home. I finally got released. I still remember right when they wheeled me in. I remember the dogs. I had a boxer at that time and a Chihuahua, which rest in peace to both of them. They're gone now. But I had those dogs and they were super excited to see me again. They were wagging their tail, going crazy, greeting me. And it was all different, but it felt great to be home. And pretty much from there, I literally still had to go through the pain of getting lifted with the Hoyer, and we're talking about this was back in 2014. So literally I was still in the wheelchair. Like I said, they had let me borrow the wheelchair from the rehab because I it was taking too long to get my own from the insurance. But pretty much from there, they ended up escorting me to the house. When I got to the house, I ended up, seeing everything. I'm like, oh wow, so that's how I'm gonna sleep. And in my mind, it was crazy because I was excited to be home, but not once did I ever think like I can't go back upstairs because I used to sleep upstairs, and never once did I think like I can't go back up to my room. I felt like, well, this is my room. This is where my bed is at now, and this is where I'm gonna sleep. This is my room, and that's pretty much why I pretty much learned to scope out the positive in situations, and that's because thinking about the negative is just gonna take away your joy. So in these situations, I was literally scoping out the positive, which I was like, well, I'm home. I'm back home with my loved ones. I'm like, okay, I gotta go through the pain of being lifted on the Hoyer lift. I'm like, okay, cool. Only bad thing was that now that Hoyer lift was manual. So literally they had to pump it up. And when they started pumping it up, I would start getting raised slowly. So now I'm experienced from the pain, but I gotta go through worser pain because of that dang manual Hoyer lift. And I was like, man, because in rehab they actually had an electric one that they would just push a button and it would lift me, and then they would push the button and it would lower me. So it made things way faster. So I literally had to get used to from that to being lifted up slower. And when I did get lifted up and get put on the wheelchair, they would have to um, not all the time, but sometimes they would take out the Hoyer lift, and slowly that's it was a long journey that I remember, because once I officially got home, that's when I didn't really know how to go off of it or what to do. And literally it was my sister that told me that she's like, if you can't use your legs as much, you should start working out your arms, do something with your arms. And that's when I was like, well, you're right. So literally I still remember I had like 3 pounders and that's all I would do, just 3 pounders. I'd lay in bed and start doing like benching, and I would start doing just 3 pounders, and I would do them. And I got to the point where I'm like, oh, they're easy. That's easy to do now. I'm like, I could go higher weight. So I ended up going to 5 pounders, and from there I graduated to that. I got from 5, I went to 10, from 10 to 15, from 15 to 20, and I maxed out at 25. And that's because I'm like, there's no reason for me to want to get strong again. I'm like, the strength that I need is all mental. I'm like, I don't really need that physical strength no more. So the way I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I've been the strongest guy in school in the past. I was benching 375 pounds. But I'm like, after high school, it's not about being the strongest no more. It's about how you're going to live life, what you're going to do to embrace the way you're living, your living style, things like that. So that's what I started thinking, and that's what I started doing. And literally, I ain't gonna lie, a big form of the push was my sister, because like I said, I was happy living at home, comfortable. I would always be on my phone. I would always be watching movies. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. At one point, my sister was like, she's leaving to work. She's like, hey, I'm leaving to work already. I'm like, oh, okay. And I was just watching a movie. And she's like, all right. And at this point, like before I even started working out with the weights and everything, this is what happened. At that point, she ends up leaving and she goes to work. Now she comes back at 12 at night, 12 a.m. And it hits 12 a.m. She ends up coming back. She's around like 12:20 a.m. And she comes back and she sees me on my phone. And at this point, she's like, I'm back. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then I was laying down in bed already and just on my phone. And at this point, she's all like, okay. And what she kind of notices, like, he's not doing nothing. This guy's comfortable. And the next morning, she's literally leaving to work again, and she sees me and I'm on the phone again, and she's like, man, I should have never gave him that phone, because he's always on it and he's not working on himself. And at that point, that's when she just had enough. And it was probably a little bit before she ended up leaving to work, she's like, I'm done. And I look at her, I'm like, huh? And she's like, I'm done. She's like, man, I've been having my life on pause for you. I've been, having school on pause because she was on college. She's like, I haven't got a boyfriend, and she's like, and I've been living my life on pause just to help you to move forward. And she's like, and all you're doing is just sitting there. You're comfortable. You're not doing nothing for yourself. She's like, I'm done. I gotta continue my life and I gotta get on with it. So at this point, that's when it hit me. And when she gave up on me, she's like, I'm done. At that point, that's when I started thinking, and I was like, she's the last person that I had, because my brother, he had his girlfriend and his life going on. He was working. He has his thing going on. My other sister, she had just had her daughter that was about 3 months old at that time. Probably 5 months. And so I was literally thinking, and my mom, she was always working. My stepdad was always working. So, all these people, they had their own life going on at the moment. So it was all on me. And I had nothing else to think about, instead of going, you know what? I got to do something for myself. I got to actually do what I got to do to get back up. And at one point, which I'm thankful for it, because it ended up coming into my head. And what I ended up thinking was, I'm like, I wasn't born in a wheelchair, so I can't die in a wheelchair. And that's when I got the motivation. And that's when I got blessed with this CNA, this PCA. A PCA is a personal care attendant. Well, I got blessed with her, and she would do me the favor of putting this big old leg brace on my right leg, because it didn't have no strength at all at that time. And she would put that on, and then she would take me outside, and while she would walk behind me with the wheelchair in case I fell, I would walk forward and walk as far as I could on the walker. And then from there, she would end up pushing me back into the house, getting me down the steps, and from there, she would end up wiping me down and changing me, and put my dress clothes on and everything. And this went on for about, it was a good like 8 months of that work, of just that hard work. And I still remember that I would count the steps sometimes in my head, and I'd be like, oh, nice, 255. I'm like, okay. And then I would sit down on the wheelchair. And then when I would sit down on the wheelchair, she even told me, she's like, pedal backwards. She's like, all the way back to your house so you could build that strength in your legs. So I'm like, okay. So literally wherever I would stop, I would literally have to pedal backwards all the way back to my house. And then at one point, the street to go up to my house, it was a little slope. So that kind of made my legs more stronger too. And from there, this was ongoing. And like I say, it lasted 8 months. And I still remember that at one point throughout the journey of being on a wheelchair, I went to this Catholic Congress with my uncle, or I went with my mom and my stepdad. But later on, they weren't feeling the vibe or nothing, so they ended up leaving. And my mom tells me, if you want, you can stay with your uncle and have him take you back to the house. So I'm like, okay. So I stayed, and when I stayed with my uncle, I remember that he ends up when the event was over. I remember he ends up wheeling me up to the bishop because the bishop was there and made an appearance. I remember that he wheels me over to him, and he goes, "Oh yeah, he asked him if he could pray for me." And at this point, he ends up praying for me, and he gives me the blessing. And literally from there, that's when I really got the motivation. And I'm like, God's on my side. He's gonna help me get out of this situation. And that's when I started, working, and that's when it ended up leading to 8 months of that, and then finally I got out of that situation, and it was all my hard work and everything. It wasn't until I was comfortable and I could at least walk around twice around the park, because the park, I still remember, it was 2,222 steps. And when I counted those steps, I'm like, I'm ready to make the walker into my wheelchair and go everywhere with it, and I'm like, and accustomed to having to go everywhere in the walker. And that's what I ended up doing, and I ended up merging to that. But again, it was a long journey of still, going on that Hoyer lift for the pain and suffering, still having to take showers. Sometimes I remember I would take a shower like a dog outside, because my sister didn't look into an inside shower until later. And the inside shower was like made for handicapped people. So I pretty much would have to transfer to a different chair and then get hosed down and get scrubbed up and everything, and then get hosed down again, pretty much like a car wash but for a human. But yeah, so I mean, pretty much that shower, we had to use it every once in a while, and when I wanted to take a good shower. And normally if I want to just take a quick one, in the summer it would help a lot, because I would just be out there in my boxers, they would shower me, and then from there I'm like, I felt clean, and I went through all these situations that I had to embrace it, because I couldn't live angry about the situation that I was in, so I pretty much would do what I had to do, and live with joy, and embrace everything that I was going through and that I had put in my path. But that is the first part. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off right there, because I'm making this video longer than the others. But go ahead, keep up so I could do part 2. This book's probably gonna have 4 parts, because I'm thinking about it and I'm like, it was a long journey being at home before we moved on to the walker, So I told you a little summary, a little scope of things I did in the wheelchair and everything. But my next video, I'm gonna break down exactly some journeys that I remember of being in the wheelchair, and falls and tribulations that I also had of being in the wheelchair. But go ahead, subscribe if you have it, comment down below, and hit the like button. All right, thank you so much. God bless.